I'm terrible at this. I'm not that bad. I'm certainly not good. I can play one groove, maybe two, about 90 beats per minute, throw a fill in on occasion. But I'm working on a song this week that really needs a good acoustic drum kit sound. And in all honesty, I could probably fire up the keyboard and play my MIDI drums and knock it out. It might even sound better in about 20 minutes. But it's been a while since I pulled out the drum kit, and I've actually never tracked the drums in my hallway. I've always tracked them in my tighter, other smaller room. And so I thought it'd be a good challenge to bring it out, mic it up, and see if I could record drums in a way that would work for this particular song. My initial idea was to show you some ways that I might fake a good drum part, playing the kick and the snare at the same time, then layering the hats and the cymbals, and then adding in some tom, fills, and loops. And I did all that, and I even got some one-shots that maybe I can chop up for you and let you have later. But I ended up getting into this and thinking, I need to figure out how to play this song. So I worked on the part for this song over and over, probably 50 to 60 times through, until I finally got a passable part. I'll play that for you in a minute, but now let me just talk to you about how I go about miking up drums. I've talked about this some in the soft drum samples video that I released months ago. But let's revisit what I did out in the hallway. Now, I'm using this old Slingerland kit that actually belongs to a friend of mine that he lets stay at my house, and it's a great kit. It's kind of got a flat, vintagey sound to it that I really like. Now, I spent the better part of 2 days on this, getting it all set up, mic'd up, editing, playing the parts over and over again. Was it worth it? I'm better because of it. Sometimes you got to go backwards before you can go forwards. At least that's what I tell myself. But yeah, let's talk about how I got this all set up. So we'll start in front of the kick. I have a Beta 52 that is stuck on a stand. It's been on that stand since I got it. And I use that mic for the kick drum because that's the mic that I have for the kick drum. It goes inside. I put it as close to the beater as I can because I have a mic on the outside, the U47 clone, which I found that I like it to be somewhat distant from the kick, not right up on that front head. That's a preference thing. And if you start playing the drum super loud, you get a lot of bleed. But I use gates on the back end to kind of keep that in check. And before I continue, another thing, normally I would put a lot of EQ and compression to tape. But since I'm by myself, I simply relied on getting decent levels and then worried about all of the mixing happening afterwards. It would probably be better if I had EQs and compressors in the analog world, but that's not the way I'm working today. I have those limitations, so I go with it. On the snare, SM57, I initially had it located kind of in the front of the drum, but I moved it to put it underneath the hi-hat. You get more rejection when it's directly underneath a hi-hat. I've also found, as I'm learning to play the drums, that I can really control the bleed from the hi-hat into the snare mic simply by the way that I play the hi-hat. A lot of people, when they come in the studio, they just wail away at the hi-hat, and that creates bleed. And the problem is, if you want to put that hi-hat mic off to the left or to the right in your image, and every time you hit the snare, you're getting a lot of bleed, your hi-hat sounds like it's on the left, and then it's in the center, and this in the center. So it's a way to help with the separation. Underneath, I put a KM84. Sometimes I use dynamic mics. Sometimes I put the mic right up close, sometimes down below. I've seen people do it different ways, and this is the way I went with it today. And I'm using it for that bright top end and to actually pick up the sound of the snares. Years ago, I bartered my way into these Sennheiser MD441s, I believe is what they are, and I always use them on toms. They sound really nice for that, and again, it's what I have. On top, my favorite mics, my Coles 4038s, they're super dark and they got that figure 8 pattern. And so they need a lot of EQ if you want to brighten them up to have that modern sound. But it takes EQ well. And the figure 8 pattern is nice in this big room. And I feel like it helped me not have to have room mics. I don't have a lot of space to set room mics up out in front of the kit. So I adjusted the level between the Coles and the kit to balance out the amount of room. Notice also that the Coles aren't level. I have one up and the other down low. And the reason for that is I want these mics to be equidistant from the snare so that when you hit the snare, it's in the dead center of the image. And so the left side of the kit needs to be a little bit higher, and the right side of the kit over by that tom can be a little bit lower and closer. And so you get this kind of arrangement. Not the only way to do it. I just find it helps me get a good stereo image. Now, you can get too far away from cymbals or too close, so you really have to listen, but I think it worked out well in this scenario. On the hi-hat, I'm using a KM84, and I'm trying to angle it away from the snare drum as best as possible so I get as much rejection. And I like the sound that I get when I put it closer to the edge as opposed to the bell. I think that covers the microphone placement. Like I mentioned earlier, I played some basic kick and snare loops, and then I played hi-hat loops. And one thing I did with the hi-hat loops is I would hit a crash and then go to either my quarter note or eighth notes on the hat. Reason being, you typically do not hit the hi-hat and the crash at the same time. That's not a natural movement if you only have two hands, right? And so that's one of those little nuances that helps make your performance sound more original. I then played quarter notes, eighth notes at different velocities, hitting different crashes, so I'd have some options. And then I played some fills that I thought might work in this song. After that, one-shots, because I sample everything these days. Started with my kick, multiple velocities, making sure to just go quickly, let it ring out as much as it needs to, but also make sure that I have multiple takes at each velocity. And even though I tried to do that, I still am not sure that I got enough, and I know I'm going to be very upset with myself if I only have 2 round robins instead of 3 when I get down the road in the editing process. But I did kick, snare, tom, I did closed hat, multiple velocities, slightly open, and then very open. And then I did the ride and the crash, multiple velocities all the way up. I got bored, had my phone because sampling is boring. Got to stay up to date on all the current happenings in Washington, right? One thing to remember about drums, the way that we record them in modern music is not natural. Like, no one puts their ear up next to a snare drum or next to a kick drum. So if you're doing a jazz recording or whatever, yes, put a couple mics up, get a natural recording. And for overheads and rooms, typically a little more natural. You want that stereo image. But for close mics, you've got to really manipulate them. You can add all the EQ you want. If you want it to have a real snappy top end, do it. If you want it to have a lot of bottom end, do it. There are no rules. I mean, yes, there are genres that you might have to fit into, but don't get too hung up on that. Maybe one day I'll do a more advanced tutorial on how I really go through and EQ my drums, but this gives you a basic overview. I have plans sometimes for what the video should be, and this is one of those weeks where it kind of changed over the course of the week, so this is basically just me documenting me miking up and trying to record songs on the drums. But I learned quite a bit, and really I'm angry at myself for taking so long to do this. I mean, I've got these hang-ups in my head that thinks, oh, I could never be a good drummer. Well, why? That's stupid. Of course I could be a good drummer. I just got to practice. And this is one of those weeks where I practiced a lot. I hope this video encourages you to go try something maybe that you've been putting off. You know, we don't have to be great at everything. The nice thing about media composition and what I'm doing is that most of the parts required don't require us to be virtuosos at everything. Oftentimes the simplest parts are what is needed. If we get too flashy, we take away from what we're trying to support visually. You know, this video is almost over, and I just realized that there's a microphone right in the top of the frame, and I'm going to leave it there because I can't redo this. In fact, I can't redo it because I got to get back to work on the drums. If you have not subscribed, please do so. Turn on notifications, and I'll talk to you next week.